Yeah, we can.
Hi, should I start admitting everyone?
Yep, we're ready.
All right.
Hi, everyone. Welcome, welcome, welcome. All right, we'll just give another minute for everyone to join us. But for those of you who have arrived, please feel free to drop your location into our chat. I'm also curious just to hear, are there any first timers for these events? Is this your first time joining us for a webinar at Give Back Yoga University? Please feel free to let us know. And we'll start here in just one more minute, not even, maybe 30 seconds. Having a look at the chat. Yay, we've got a first timer from North Carolina. Welcome, welcome. All right, well, I will go ahead and kick us off. If we've not met before virtually, my name is Chelsea. I am co-executive director at the Give Back Yoga Foundation with the illustrious Rob Schwer here by my side in yellow today. We're both very pleased to welcome you to this webinar on the intersection between cancer and incarceration here at Give Back Yoga University. Some of you who have been here before may know this, but back in October of 2022, so not quite a year ago, we brought what we now call our founding programs. These are the programs underneath the Give Back Yoga umbrella. Yoga4Cancer, of which Tari is the founder and director, and Prison Yoga Project, for which Bill is the executive director, along with a few of our other ones, Yoga 12-Step Recovery and Eat, Breathe, Thrive. We brought them all together to the Omega Institute for what was a really, really powerful, we were there to film online courses, but we actually ended up having some really powerful conversations about the intersection between the different populations we work with. Those courses are now live on Give Back Yoga University, and some of you may have already explored some of them, but this webinar series we're doing now came out of those conversations. We found in those conversations that so often as nonprofits in the yoga space, our work happens in the silo that we're working in, kind of necessarily because we're deep in our work and, you know, we usually have a lot on our plates. But there was so much that came out of these conversations, and realizing there were a lot of similarities in how we work and a lot of places where there was room for growth, even as organizations, and learning about, oh, okay, well, you know, we may think Bill works in prisons, but of course there are cancer patients in prisons. So that was part of why we've come together to offer this webinar. So I'm really happy to have Tari and Bill here today to have this conversation. Rob will be moderating, and I will come in at the very end just to give you a little bit of news at the end of our event. Housekeeping, one piece of housekeeping is you are so welcome, and really welcome, because it helps me to see faces, to have yourself on camera. We welcome that. You won't be on the recording if you're on camera, because we've spotlighted our videos. But when we ask questions, you can either drop your questions into the chat, and just know that if you take yourself off audio to ask a question, that you will be on the recording. So that's totally in your hands. Probably the best way to ask questions otherwise is just to drop questions into the chat. So on that note, I'm going to hand it over to Rob, who's moderating today's event.
Thank you, Chelsea. And I want to, before we start, I want to thank the teams at the back end of today's event. You know, we see the front end, but not realize all the time how many people have been working with 3 organizations, Give Back Yoga Foundation, Prison Yoga Project, and Yoga4Cancer, to put this on. So thank you all for doing that, for your energy, your talent, and your commitment to this work. As Chelsea said, you know, and I've seen over the 17 years of working in yoga service, there are now a lot of organizations who are doing really good work in prisons, for veterans, for cancer, and children, and yoga, and it's spread enormously. And yet what we found when we were at the Omega Institute for Holistic Studies last October was that when you sit down for a conversation between these various different nonprofits, what you find is that there's a complex relationship going on, for example, today between cancer, trauma, and incarceration. And that's what we want to uncover in the conversation between Bill Brown and Tari Prinster. And I'm excited to have them here. They're two of my favorite friends in the world. And so let's get started. First, let me thank Omega because they made a huge gift to us. And they deserve so much credit for being a touchstone organization in the mindfulness and the growth area where people can have an opportunity to go to that campus and connect and come back different people. I know my first yoga class was at the Omega Institute 24 years ago, and look what's happened. Okay, let's get started. First question to Tari and to Bill. To an outsider, you work with different populations. What we've learned in our work is that the notion of these are separate populations is an illusion. How do you, Tari and Bill, understand the connection and the overlap between your work?
Well, I'll jump in there, Bill, unless you want to.
Go ahead.
So Chelsea and Rob both mentioned the silo effect of how we work. And I think that is appropriate to explaining how, having been working with cancer patients and survivors for almost 25 years, looking at cancer, we look at it in terms of populations of men and women who get cancer in terms of the silo of this kind of cancer or this kind of cancer, the silo of what kind of treatments. And so I was flabbergasted to get out of my silo and look into some of the data and statistics around what cancer means to the incarcerated population. And I had basically been totally ignorant of a lot of facts that emerged in getting out of my silo. And that's what we're going to go into. And it's really important facts that I think we should all know about, especially those of you who are on this, who are already working in prison. So that's what I see as the intersection. Oh my gosh, when you see the data on what we uncovered in just looking out of my silo at the cancer impact in the incarcerated population.
Yeah, it's, the statistics, and I think we'll get into, we'll be sharing those momentarily, but they didn't really surprise me to see. I guess there were a few surprises in it. But it wouldn't surprise me that the outcomes for people are poor, given what I know about prison. And for me, I have had a number of people in my groups who are either recovering from a treatment or actively engaged in a treatment. And just the few conversations that Tari and I have had leading up to this has really shown me two things, that there is this incredible need to address this as a special circumstance or condition that people who are incarcerated are experiencing, and that also I have a gap. I have a gap in my knowledge over the best way to support these people in my programs. And one of these people, that that I talk about is has had just such a tremendous impact on me personally. And, you know, I feel like I learn as much from my students about what yoga is as I do from any other place, and to see Ryan's journey with yoga, and to be able to speak with him about how that connects in with his experience with cancer has taught me so much.
So before we get into the stats, could I just ask you, Bill, what's it like? What's it feel like to receive a cancer diagnosis in prison?
Well, so I met with Ryan, his name's Ryan, this Sunday to have a conversation about this. And, you know, as he's telling his story, you know, he's in prison, he's at Old Folsom Prison, and he's serving a life sentence. And he's 28 years old, and his cellie forced him to go in and have the lump on his neck taken a look at. So one, you know, he wasn't going to actively seek care for himself. Like there's sort of there's that. So his cellie forces him to go and get checked out. And then of course he sees the diagnosis, and his first thought was, well, of course I've got cancer. Of course I've got cancer. You know, this is who I am. My life is a fuck up, right? Pardon the language. But you know, and so he said it was, you know, like life on top of life. You know, he's expecting to spend his whole life in prison, and now, well, maybe his life's just not going to be as long as he thought it was going to be. And he said it initially sort of unlocked much more impulsive behavior for him. You know, he was young and in a pretty high level prison at the time, where, you know, people get up to mischief. I'm going to put it that way.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that feeling with us. I appreciate that. Why don't you both start looking at the facts and have a conversation within that? All right.
Absolutely.
So don't feel like we have to go through this PowerPoint, don't to point by point by point, but have a conversation.
Yeah. Well, this is definitely, we did not intend this to be death by PowerPoint. But when I said that I got out of my silo, the first thing I did was Google how many incarcerated people have cancer. And to my surprise, what I discovered was there is no such number, because prisons don't keep track of how many cancer survivors are in prisons. Unlike the rest of the world, they don't really care how many people in the prisons have cancer. And so I couldn't find that number. Whereas in the regular world, in the uncarcerated world, there is an accurate accounting. Every day that a cancer, someone's diagnosed with cancer, that is the Department of Health and Human Services keeps track of that. Now, what is interesting about that is that all we can do is do an estimate. And so if we did, you know, we can only give an approximation as to how many people have cancer. But what we do know are some things about cancer, is that as the population of the world gets older, more incidents happen. But what I did find, and we can go to the next slide, the really most important part of the facts. What they do keep track of in prisons is the number of deaths. They don't care how many survivors there are, but they do care about how many people die. And that was the most shocking thing to me, is that death by cancer in prisons today is over 30%. And death by cancer is the highest cause of death in prisons. It beats heart disease, it beats suicide. It is the highest number of deaths in a prison happen from cancer. That shocked me. And, you know, the other facts that the mortality rate of those who are incarcerated is so much higher than those who are not incarcerated. So, you know, what does this mean? it means that when you do get diagnosed with cancer, you're more likely to die of it. Whereas in the normal population, what we know about cancer is that more people survive it than die of it. But that is definitely not what is happening in the incarcerated population. This is a big surprise that what we need to be doing in prisons, when what we do with Yoga for Cancer is help people understand how they can be their best advocate to keep their immune system strong, to deal with their side effects. And even more so in prisons, we need to work together to lower that mortality rate. So that was a big surprising data fact for me. I don't know, Bill, you can jump in here at any time.
Yeah. I mean, me too. Again, like I said, as soon as we started talking, and you were sharing some of the information that you had uncovered, like I said, it made sense to me what you were uncovering. But it was also very much news to me as well. There's this last point, 78% of cancer deaths occur after release. This is something that, when we talk about that mortality rate of 45% higher, I think it's probably even greater than that, or the rate of mortality from cancer for people who have been incarcerated, not necessarily those who are currently incarcerated, I think pushes the
It's
number
even greater, yeah.
Say,
Way high.
And
this is counter to the non-incarcerated population, where we see a completely different trend, which is more survival than mortality. So, how do we lower that mortality rate in the prisons is the question.
Yeah.
And why is it higher? Why do you think that the mortality rate in prisons is higher?
Yeah, this is so there was I saw it flash by in the chat. I'm not really good at looking at chat and focusing, but somebody had asked a question, is like, why isn't that being tracked? And I think it's not so much necessarily that it's not being tracked, but that there's no clearinghouse that's bringing all of that information together. And yeah, it should probably, there's a lot of valuable lessons to be learned from this data, but there isn't a lot of resources. And so, as running a nonprofit that seeks to measure the outcomes for what we're doing, we recognize that can get quite expensive. And so to do that kind of analysis and research, there may just not be resources available for it. And this is one of the things that I see, I think that most likely is contributing to this. And I want to be sure to recognize that the folks working in healthcare in the corrections industry are doing their absolute best, and honestly, choosing to go into less than ideal circumstances to try and do their best. But the resources are just so slim for proper care. That I think this has a large effect on it. Not to mention the fact that the environment itself is really not conducive to any kind of healing. The level of stress that a person in a prison is experiencing is off the charts a lot of times. So definitely those have to be.
There also must be competition. I mean, getting attention to getting into being seen by the healthcare professional is because there are so few and they're limited, and to get the proper attention before. I mean, one of the reasons that I see as to why the mortality rate is higher is because there is a lag time to when we know for a fact that if you're diagnosed with an early stage cancer, you're not going to die of an early stage cancer. You just don't die of stage 1 breast cancer. You only die of stage 4 breast cancer. If they are not,
and this may be,
they're not getting access.
I think there's an attitudinal aspect to that too. And I know that this is one of the things that you and I have talked about, like the ability to advocate for oneself is crucial in treatment. And I think that this is something that a lot of folks who are incarcerated have not been the best self-care advocates for themselves in their lives. And so it's not a skill necessarily that they're coming into with, but then you're working in it, or you're in an environment where you're not encouraged to make choices for yourself. You're encouraged to do and to follow along, you know, and so, yeah, absolutely. That has to be a factor in delaying seeking care that is affecting these outcomes.
And that speaks to that number of the post-incarcerated once that the higher mortality rate in those who have been freed, that they are not able to get access probably to healthcare that they would have had minimally in a prison. But then they are also, you know, maybe not taking care of themselves as well as they should. And knowing what very simple things one can do to avoid a recurrence or to avoid a cancer altogether. And that's where, you know, we try to educate, you know, this is something that, you know, can be managed. Our vulnerability to a cancer is something that we advocate, just as you do, you know, your avocation for being responsible for, you know, their actions, as you encourage your students to be responsible for their actions. Healing is taking responsibility, and we can do that in prison, teach them how to take care of themselves, and we can do that out of prison with yoga. And that's our big intersection.
Yeah.
And let's go on with the slides. There's some good stuff in here.
Where did we leave that?
Yeah, I guess so. So when you know this goal, so I'm realizing that for the Prison Yoga Project community, there's really two things. One, you know, I currently have, there's probably not been a time in the last 10 years that I have been working in prisons and jails, you know, sharing yoga, that there has not been a person in one of my groups who has cancer. Am I saying that right? You know what I mean? Yeah. There is always an opportunity for me to have an impact for somebody who is a survivor or in treatment for cancer, and I don't necessarily know how best to support them. But then also I recognize that there is an opportunity, given the exaggerated incidence of cancer in prison, to potentially start groups that are specifically for cancer patients and cancer survivors in prisons, and to work alongside the healthcare teams there, that there's an opportunity to bring this in. And I think Tari can speak much better to the efficacy of and the necessity for working or for bringing yoga into a treatment and recovery plan.
Well, absolutely. I mean, in the general population, you know, we have some really simple data. 1 in 2 men in their lifetime will get cancer. So that data applies to whether you're incarcerated or not incarcerated. So no matter what, you're going to have those with cancer in boy, wouldn't it be nice if you could go to prison and not ever get cancer? If that would be you know, a good reason to go out and commit crime, huh? But in any case, in order to lower that mortality, which is our joint goal, that is the intersection, is you got to understand the facts about cancer. You have to know, just as, you know, if someone were being treated for a non-Hodgkin's lymphoma or lung cancer and being administered chemotherapy, what is the first thing, as you as a yoga teacher should, you know, the red flag that should go up? If they are having chemotherapy, red flag number one, they're going to suffer bone loss. So what do you do as a yoga teacher to be, we do no harm, but you know, even though there's many benefits, there can be harm done if one is not aware of the kinds of things that you probably shouldn't do. And that's, I guess, what we do in yoga, and the training for Yoga for Cancer is, yes, there are things that I would consider that we don't do, but very few, very minimal. There are precautions and there are modifications. But what we don't do in Yoga for Cancer is take the rigor out. We don't make it just because someone has cancer that we send them to, you know, a restorative class and you know, only do meditation. This is not what it is about. In fact, the most important thing for someone who's teaching in prisons, to where you know 1 in 2 of the men and 1 in 3 of the women are going to have cancer, is to understand what the American Cancer Society says. They recommend an active yoga practice. They recommend at least 150 minutes per week of active exercise, not go home and take, you know, take a nap, which is what I think is one of the assumptions that a lot of people who have not had cancer or, you know, think that immediately going to mean that, you know, you shouldn't do anything. It's very much the opposite of that. So in learning about how to deal with the incarcerated population, we need knowledge. We need to understand the side effects. We need to understand the treatments, and then be very informed on how to modify for that.
Yeah. Yeah, and some of it's counterintuitive, right? I
don't know if it's counterintuitive, but some of it is it is pretty logical. But I think that as a, which I see all the time as a yoga teacher, we bring all of our misunderstandings with us as to what it means. We have a lot of preconceived ideas as what someone should and shouldn't do if they have cancer. And so part of that is to, if that's intuitive or counterintuitive, I don't know which, but in any case, we really have to understand our misunderstandings.
Yeah. And maybe that's what I mean by that we have misconceptions about what the most appropriate path might be, and the thing that we need to do, and this is the same for, you know, going in to do this work inside prisons, you know, we have, that's a lot of the reason for the existence for Prison Yoga Project, is to make sure that people are going in with the right kind of information and perspective that is going to be most beneficial for the people in our care. You've really got to know, when you're working with a special population, you really got to know a lot about that. It can't just be about good intentions.
Right. And if you have a limited access to things like a yoga class in a prison, I would assume that is the reality, that it's a privileged and a limited privilege in order to do that. And if you have someone who is doing yoga with you and gets diagnosed with cancer, the last thing you want is for that person to not come to your yoga class. You want them to continue to come in spite of that diagnosis. In fact, you want them to come and feel included and not excluded. And so knowing how to take care of them is really very, very important. And in the situation where that is not necessarily the go-to, readily accessible, we want to make sure that they do come back.
Yeah, absolutely. And just, in thinking about like the things that I've heard you say that become crucial, the taking effective action for oneself, and taking responsibility for your part in your care feels really important to me. And then also, I think the attitudinal perspective, and I'm hoping that maybe you can talk a little bit or say a little bit more about that.
Well, I think that there is, for someone who is incarcerated, compared to someone who's diagnosed with cancer, whether they're incarcerated or not, both of those populations go through a culture shift, so to speak. There's the idea that when you are incarcerated, you are there not to be punished, but to change some of your self-destructive habits and to transform yourself into something else. That kind of culture shift is also true for someone diagnosed with cancer. It's very easy for the world at large to say, to send you the message that you're diagnosed with cancer and you must have done something wrong. You must have caused this cancer. And that is the culture shift we don't want to have happen. What we want to have happen is that someone diagnosed with cancer, incarcerated or unincarcerated or incarcerated, we want them to take responsibility for the things that we do know that you can do through a regular yoga practice to keep your immune system strong and resistant. And so there are similarities in the attitudes that we want to promote. And mostly that is that agency taking, which is really, really important. So lifestyle changes is what is taught in a prison yoga class. The advocacy of being your own advocate, but also how you can do that. And I know I've witnessed some of the interviews that you have on a Prison Yoga Project short course that, it's incredible how they give credit to the yoga for allowing them to find ways to take responsibility. And I think that the same intention is there for someone. I mean, heck, you get the double whammy of being in prison like Ryan, in prison and get a cancer diagnosis. Then here's a right platform where we can really we as yoga teachers can really support a prisoner who has been diagnosed with cancer, if we understand both how our language is working with them and what our intentions are. So, it's a wonderful crossover.
There's a question that's come up that I want to throw to both of you because it's relevant to this discussion. And it's come up in 2 or 3 of the questions. How can I support a patient dealing with the fear of cancer coming back and the fear of the unknown? Related to that, are there specific yoga practices that soothe those feelings? Are there certain things that should be considered or avoided with respect to grief around a cancer diagnosis?
Well, I would change that word grief to trauma. Being diagnosed with cancer is a traumatic event. And the whole grief thing comes from our misunderstandings that it necessarily has to be a death sentence. It is not. And what can you do? There are very concrete things that you can do to deal with the anxiety, which is to help the student, the patient, the prisoner understand that the reason we get cancer is because there is a failure in your immune system. Not that you did something bad in your past, but it's an immune system failure. And there are very concrete things that we can do in our yoga practice, which we know now there's evidence to show that it does strengthen the immune system. It invigorates the immune system. And we can be a participant and by using yoga to keep the immune system strong. So concretely, it is that. So I would be, I don't know, did I answer that question?
Yeah. Bill, do you have a response?
Just thinking about the discussion that Ryan and I had the other day, he described the yoga space. I think he used, yoga space as the only place that he was really able to reflect on and process what he was going through. And, this is, to me, I think, if we are not processing that trauma or that grief, then it is held in our bodies in a way that is going to suppress any kind of, immune system response that might be helpful to the healing process. And so, and it's not something that, like, our approach is really space holder. We're there as space holders, not necessarily to make something happen, but to create the conditions that allow for something to happen. And, time and time again, I mean, hearing that from Ryan yesterday, it's the yoga space, that creates the opportunity for him to work through and process that. That I don't necessarily need to make that happen, but I can create the conditions for him to be able to process that. And it's like I guess we can't make another person's grief go away. We can't make another person's trauma go away. And so we can do things to support them through that process, but ultimately it's not something that we can control. I think this is what's coming up for me in that. Sorry, go ahead, Tari.
You hit on that one word, control, which I think is, another one of those places that being imprisoned and having a cancer diagnosis have a similarity. You lose control as soon as, that's part of the whole process. You lose control. And when you are diagnosed with cancer, you feel to some extent, well, as a patient, you lose control. You surrender that control to the doctors that are going to do all these. But and in many circumstances, people feel like when they are diagnosed with cancer, that their body has somehow betrayed them and let them down, and so another loss of control. And I think that it's creating a space in yoga for letting those feelings be, okay, I'm not in control of being here in prison, but there are things that I can do that can give me control. There are ways not only to control what I'm thinking through a positive meditation practice, but there are actually positive things that I can do physically. And so, the yoga gives him some form of gives him back some form of control. And I think it's wonderful.
I feel like this comes back to this question of attitude, because this was the other big thing that really struck me for in my conversation with Ryan. One, it wasn't like it was a long process, man. It was years and years that he is in this treatment. And he went through 2 separate rounds of chemotherapy, and then either 1 or 2 bone marrow transplants. My notes may not capture how many bone marrow transplants. Anyway, it was late in his treatment that he said that, his initial attitude was, well, yeah, of course I've got cancer, of course, and then this leading to this sort of even more impulsive behavior. And then over the course of his treatment, recognizing how much people were caring for him and investing in his life, that there were these people who were really sincerely wanting him to get better and to get behind this. And he said he started to perceive the care that he received. He said it felt like love from the universe. So all the doctors, all the nurses, even the people from CDCR that would drive him to the hospital, you know, were taking an active effort in preserving his life. And it was in that process, and then getting involved in the yoga space allows him more space to reflect on just that, because this is, you know, what we talk about compassion and how we move out of, you know, when we let go of that reactivity in the amygdala, let go of the things that separate us, that compassion just emerges from that. And so he began to perceive his whole life differently. And this is something that I think, you know, the type of trauma that lands somebody in a prison or a jail, let's stick with prison, you know, that may allow somebody to get to a place where they commit a harm so serious that they are, you know, separated from society in that way, is really a feeling of that society has nothing for them, you know, trust nobody. And I think the treatment that he received helped him come back from that feeling of being separated, and helped him realize that he was a part of a community and a part of a group that loved him, and he could experience the care that he was giving and even receive it. You know how hard it is to receive care sometimes, right? I think we all experience that, to accept that and feel that we're worthy of that. And I think, you know, I mean, he's 6 years completely free. I think it's going on 7 years completely free, you know, and in remission, and he's out now and he's thriving as a human being, and thriving in a career where he is giving back and serving others. And I think the whole arc of his journey, I don't know, I say that, like, the pressure that a lot of the people that I've met in my programs have gone through the various incarceration, the cancer diagnosis, the everything, it leads them to be diamond forged. You know, these are the
Beautiful image.
most brilliant people, resilient people that I've ever met in my life.
Yeah, beautiful, Bill. Here's the question for both of you, which, and I'm sure this related to Ryan too, Bill.
Yeah.
The most challenging part of keeping my practice during chemotherapy was the extreme body soreness. I didn't feel like moving. The less I moved, the less I wanted to even meditate or practice pranayama. How do we keep our students motivated while supporting their low energy levels and their aching bodies?
Yeah, that's Tari. I want to hear your answer to this, because I need to know.
Teach us, Tari.
Well, cancer-related fatigue, CRF, is a well-researched phenomenon. In fact, probably all of the research that has been done on yoga and cancer focuses on fatigue. Anxiety and fatigue are probably the two most researched side effects of cancer treatment. And it has been shown with very strong numbers that the antidote to fatigue is movement. It is not, as we and again, I'll go back to you know, our myths and misunderstandings about cancer, which come from years and years and years back when we first started our war on cancer, is that oncologists would say, you know, go home and rest, take it easy. And what has been shown is that even a little bit of movement, and of course, you know, your level of fatigue is going to vary from day to day. But the fatigue from cancer-related fatigue is not like the fatigue that you feel after you did all your gardening yesterday and then ran 10 miles and then you felt fatigue and you can go to bed and sleep. That's not the way it is. It is a process. I know when I was going through treatments, the first thing I would do after I would have a treatment, I would, it was back in the days when I was riding my bike, I would go for a bike ride after treatment. And that to me was, for me, in my head, whether it was happening or not, I don't know, but to me, it was like I was working that poison through my body. And I then later felt less residual from it. But American Cancer Society says, that is the solution, not only and to, so, yeah, I know your body's aching. My bones ached too. And, the chemo goes directly to your bones. And another reason why, we need to talk about bone loss and bone building and what not to do, what to have cautions against doing in our yoga practice for anyone who is undergoing any kind of cancer treatment, whether it's hormone therapy or radiation, the things we need to be aware of. But I know that it might not be so satisfying to hear that your aching body is going to benefit from going from a walk, but the measures are there. And, maybe it's only to the front door today, and maybe tomorrow it's around the block.
Yeah.
But move.
Tari, one of our participants has said that she's, where's the question? She's been asked to teach yoga to her cancer patients. Are there any yoga moves that are not good for cancer patients?
Yeah. Well, there are. The list of what not to do is this long. The list of what to do is this long. There are very few. I would say that the one to have the most caution about, and I have taken completely out of any yoga teaching I do, is a forward bend, a complete forward bend. Is just take it out, no matter, and you'd be surprised when you start looking at all of the poses that we do that have a forward bend in them. But you can make that forward bend into a forward fold, maintaining a flat back. But if there's any amount of bone loss, a forward bend is dangerous. Others have said, oh, well, that might be, a reason not to do an inversion. And I would say inversions are probably something you want to do only for the potential of falling. Because if you do have bone loss, and falling out of a headstand would not be a good thing to happen, whether you have cancer or don't have cancer. I would say those kinds of poses do with modifications and make them safe. So as I said, I think that there are other things that we do in yoga that are probably not necessarily poses, but there are some pranayama practices that are certainly, even Mr. Iyengar in his book says, if you are, I see you smile, Bill, I did the same thing. But he said that, doing breath of fire or any kind of Kalabhati raises the body temperature. And for someone, undergoing cancer treatments, raising your body temperature, whether it's for heart disease or cancer, that's not a good thing to do. So there are some rigorous pranayamas that I would leave out and not do.
Yeah. So Tari and Bill, Tari, what you just said speaks volumes for yoga teachers to take the oncology short course, because you go through a lot of that material there. And what Bill said, you know, the reason that Give Back Yoga is involved in this right now, in these short courses for specialized populations, because in any given yoga class, students are going to arrive at the mat with an array of visible and less visible mental and physical conditions, you know, from eating disorders to not having a good body image, to recovering from addiction, to having a family member or yourself being involved in the criminal justice system, to surviving or being diagnosed with cancer. And so these short courses are intended to familiarize you with all of this material. So anyway, this is not a question, but it's rather sweet. I attended the same prison yoga project training at Indie Yoga as Bill Brown did many years ago. It's so cool to see Bill still doing this work, and I'm excited to reconnect.
I saw that yesterday, and I reached out to see who it was, and it really is amazing. And yeah, Melanie, if you can hear this, yeah, it said bill@prisonyoga.org. Please send me an email. It's crazy to think of that this has been 10 years now, and just the absolute complete change in trajectory that my life has taken. But I think you get into yoga service, and suddenly it becomes obvious that this is the most important thing that I could do with my one wild and precious life. And so, yeah, that was a nice reminder of the whole journey.
Another question for you, Bill. Do you have ways to help the incarcerated deal with the nonstop noise of prison when they are practicing yoga or trying to work on mindfulness?
This is one of so, you know, it comes up so often. And this is what I think is actually meant by pratyahara. It's not that we need to have that quiet space. It's nice to have that quiet space, but if we can recognize how that noise and that chaos is affecting our body, and start to be able to discharge the energy, like if the loud noise happens, or the you know, the loudspeaker overhead goes off, feel it, allow it to be in your body, and allow it to move through your body and release from your body. And I think that's greater than a lot of times. Some people go in and it's like, oh, I want to, you know, make people feel good. And it's like, well, it's actually about feeling what you feel, regardless of whether that's good or bad, and just letting what is be in a way that doesn't cause suffering, right? Allowing, because it's transitory. And at the same time, you could hear a pin drop in the gym on Echo Yard at the end of the class sometimes, you know, that it is the only quiet time that happens. I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, it does. Tari, this is, you know, someone who's been trained in Yoga4Cancer, is interested in how to bring awareness to these potential therapeutic meditation practices to wider communities and to more individuals. So I guess the question is, what is Yoga4Cancer doing to scale its work into hospitals and other treatment centers?
Well, concretely, what we are doing is following the research, and we have completed a one white paper. It's now a few years old, and since it was published, oodles and oodles of new research evidence that shows the effects of yoga on those who are recovering or managing long-term side effects from cancer treatments. And so the white paper is something that is easily accessible off of our website. And it is that we are trying to get distributed as much as possible to the world of not just oncology, but to all medical professions, because what the key to all of this is referrals. It is a referral business, and what we want is for our goal, Yoga for Cancer's goal, is to see that oncology yoga classes are included and prescribed in every cancer patient's treatment plan, and that it is available. So our teachers are out there working hard to bring this information to those who would be making referrals, those who would be making economic decisions about starting yoga classes in integrative care facilities, which is significantly on the rise. It's quite possible, but if it is prescribed along with chemotherapy, along with radiation, along with surgery, the prescription of take a yoga class, it'll be good for you.
Okay,
I
last
can hear
question.
Josie saying, take a vigorous yoga class.
Last question, Tari. Can you, in 1 minute, answer this question? What are the rules around compassionate release with an advanced stage of cancer diagnosis? And we only have a minute.
Compassionate release rules. Well, first of all, I don't think there are any rules. And I'm not too sure I really understand this question. I know I read it when it was sent to me, but it's for sure that an advanced stage of cancer comes with it a huge opportunity to understand what your life is all about. And I think that is the only rule. And we all, live in we live in a world that is in denial of that we're not going to last forever. We're around forever. But in my experience of witnessing those who have advanced cancers is that they are forced, but they do it willingly to deal with end of life and what that means for them. It is far more common among those who have early, not late stage, to be quite anxious and in denial still of the fact that they have cancer. That is much more alarming. And what I see in those with advanced cancers is a calmness. And maybe that's, as with Ryan, maybe that's the gift of a cancer diagnosis, a late stage cancer diagnosis, is that it does take, and didn't we say intention was it's an attitude shift that happens.
Yeah. And I think that attitude is so important, where there is hope, as with Ryan, and I hope that he has a very long life. And I had a friend recently pass with glioblastoma. And when he received the diagnosis, it's 18 months on the outside. And I watched him go through his decline and inevitable passing. Yeah, and it does reinforce this fact of life, and it's part of the Buddha's origin story. Sickness, old age, and death, is the thing that, recognizing the reality of those conditions, those parts of the human condition, is what sets him off on his spiritual path. Yeah.
Tari and Bill, you've made my day.
Yeah, thanks, Rob.
And
You too.
I hope you've made the day of all of our participants. I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart. And I'm going to pass it over to my dear co-executive director, Chelsea Roth.
Wow, what a conversation, you two. That I can't be biased, but I feel like that was actually my favorite conversation. And it felt like you actually treaded new ground. I was just struck by how deeply needed these conversations are, just even between two organizations. So thank you. I was hoovering my house, sitting on my AirPods, and was just really blown away, and coming back to look at slides every once in a while to get context. But thank you both so much. I also want to thank everyone who's here with us live, and everyone maybe watching the recording in the future somewhere. And also just mention, and it's part of why I've come on, and it's not Tari or Bill doing this, but they may not promote themselves, but I wanted to let you know that both of their organizations have new online courses available on Give Back Yoga University right now. Tari's launches today. It opens for classes today. Because you're, and Bill and PYP's has been open for a little while, so those classes are all available. Because you're in this webinar or signed up for this webinar, you actually get a, you're really the only people that will get access to a special discount on the Oncology Yoga course. So that is a significant discount. So keep an eye on your inbox. It's a 24 hours only, and it only goes to you all. So that'll come through as a little gift, and a thank you for being here. And then in addition to the prison yoga has a course on bringing yoga to people who are incarcerated. Tari's is obviously on oncology yoga, so really important independent courses that can add a lot. But actually, we also have one where Tari speaks a little bit with James Fox and Josephine Wickstrom, who are also with the Prison Yoga Project in a course called Conversations at the Intersection of Yoga and Healing. And that we brought 4 nonprofits together that each independently work with addiction, eating disorders, cancer, and incarceration to have conversations like this one. And again, I shouldn't pick favorites, but it's definitely my favorite course on our platform right now. So those are available. You can take, if you take 3 online courses and participate in our upcoming Yoga and Recovery Symposium, which is this September, looking at yoga as a healing force and also a prevention modality in addiction and eating disorders. If you take all of 3 courses in a symposium, you can get our Give Back Yoga diploma. And yeah, I'll just mention, please join us for the symposium in September. We've got Gabor Mate and some really incredible speakers, some of which have yet to be announced, that I'm like literally on the top of my tongue, but I'm going to hold it because we can't announce it till August. But really exciting event. Thank you for being here. That's our little
I see so many names I recognize from the PYP community, and folks that are working within corrections on the call today that I wasn't expecting to see here, and it's really beautiful. Thank you all for showing up.
Wonderful. Thanks, everyone. We'll see you at the next
Thanks,
one.
Give Back Yoga. Thank you all for attending.
Yeah.
Thank you, Tari and Bill. Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.